Hello everyone, back to today's second video. So we've already done the 5-day forecast. You can find the video to that here on the homepage. Just scroll down the page a bit, it's underneath the link ads. And we've got written version, you get to that via buttons at the top of the page. It's going to be a very active 5 days coming up. Quite a lot of uncertainty in terms of the actual position of the low pressure, especially on Sunday, but also a bit on Friday as well, which is only a couple of days away. So we could be in some very wet and quite stormy weather, especially on Sunday, but it's all a little bit uncertain, especially the situation for Sunday. But if you want to know more about the 5-day forecast, do check it out. We finish on Monday, and it finishes very interestingly, because at that point we're starting to get high pressure building in over Scandinavia, and so this video is going to look beyond the 5-day forecast period up to day 10, which takes us well into the second week of February. So we're going to see what becomes of this high pressure on the latest computer models that's over Scandinavia on Monday, as we're running through next week. Some fairly interesting charts to look at. But before I get on with all of that, just to say about the ads, there's 6 articles on all of the page, just mention those. You have a browse widgets, click through the links, you're going to be helping us to page website, and thanks very much for doing that. There's also video ads for those pages which open out with content. Give those a watch, you will be helping us to pay for gazworthis.com. Just starting off very quickly with the situation in the stratosphere. There's not really been much more in the way of warming in terms of those temperatures at 10 HPA over the North Pole. So we have the stratospheric warming occurring on Sunday and Monday. It doesn't reach the threshold of a sudden stratospheric warming quite, because we're not reversing the winds at 10 and 30 HPA. So it's not a sudden stratospheric warming, but it's not a minor warming either. It's somewhere in between. So it's fairly significant warming that's occurring right now in the stratosphere. Has been over the past couple of days over the North Pole. What effect this has remains to be seen. It will certainly reduce the polar vortex for a time. I don't think it's going to kill it. I don't think it's going to split it. We probably won't have an effect such as we did back in 2013 when we had a sudden stratospheric warming at the beginning of January. And that one eventually culminated in an extraordinarily cold March. I don't think we'll have anything as dramatic as that from this warming event, because it's not quite reached a sudden stratospheric warming. It's not quite enough to destroy the polar vortex. Nevertheless, the polar vortex is going to be weakened, and that might allow the opportunity to get some high pressure going over Scandinavia. We know that through this winter we've had several attempts at getting a Scandinavian high together. We had one go just after Christmas, had another go early in January. It never really got going because as it formed, it was pushed down into central and southeastern Europe by the jet stream and the polar vortex from the Atlantic. So all of the really cold air with it went down into the southeast of Europe, and we know that the Balkans, Greece, Turkey, Italy, places in the central and eastern Mediterranean have unusually cold and snowy weather. That was because a Scandinavian high tried to form but was unable to persist across Scandinavia, just broken down into southeastern Europe by the strength of the Atlantic flow and the zona westerlies and the jet stream. Because we're weakening the polar vortex, we may find that we can lock in an area of high pressure across Scandinavia. So I'm not sure that the Scandinavian high the models are going for, and you're going to see in a moment next week, is a direct result of the stratospheric warming, because we have had earlier attempts through this winter to get a Scandinavian high going. So it's one of those winters that's a little bit set up for a Scandinavian high. But because of the stratospheric warming, we might be able to keep it going, if you like, rather than failed Scandinavian highs as we've had so far this winter. So looking at 30 HPA again, there's not really been much development. This were around where we was. Yes, these certainly have had a warming in the stratospheric temperature at 30 HPA, but again, not to a very dramatic level. So yes, it is a significant warming in the stratosphere, but it's not a sudden stratospheric warming. It's not going to, or very unlikely to, completely destroy the polar vortex. So what about weather next week to 10 days? These are the GFS temperature and precipitation ensembles for the next 2 weeks. The red line here is the 30-year temperature average. So we're milder than average at the moment. Later this week into the weekend, we're going down to around normal. Now, this is the period just here that we've got the uncertainty in terms of this Scandinavian high. You'll notice there's a big split going on in the ensemble at that point. It's around the 8th, 9th of February, so sort of the end of next week, if you like. And what we're looking at here is some very substantially cold outlier members. The operational is included, which is that thick green line just there, but we've also got other ensemble members that do look really very cold through this period at the start of the second week of February. However, we have got several members of the ensemble that are staying around average, which is close to the red line, and we've even got a few ensemble members that are actually quite mild, these ones up here. Again, those are outliers, but they can't be discounted. So from the coldest to the mildest ensemble members, from coldest there to the mildest there, we've got something like a 25 degree temperature differential. So obviously there's a lot of uncertainty about this period that we're looking at for the end of the first week of February into the start of the second week of February. And we need to see the ensembles firming up more on this, I think, before we can get too excited. We want to see many more members, lines of spaghetti, if you like, dipping down below the red line into that sort of area, including the white line, which is the ensemble mean. So that's taking all sort of 22, counting the operational run, members of the GFS model ensemble. It takes it all together and creates a mean line. That's the white line, and we want to see that dipping down below the red line as well. So we certainly have the opportunity to build an area of high pressure up over Scandinavia, get winds into the east and turn things bitterly cold and potentially snowy, but at the moment it looks like it's a fairly lowish risk, so say around 25-30%, perhaps, something like that. Anyway, let's go through the charts. So this is the GFS for Monday. This is where we left off with the 5-day forecast. We've got an area of high pressure in over Scandinavia at that point. Quite an active looking Atlantic. Low pressure is fairly deep in the Atlantic, coming up against this blocking area of high pressure. So through to Tuesday, it looks relatively mild still then. Atlantic driven flow with there's a weather front that's coming across the country, or trying to come across the country through here, coming against this ridge of high pressure that is attempting to introduce that cold air from the east. So fairly mild and unsettled for the start of next week. The middle part of next week, this is Wednesday, 8th of February, a week away, shows a high pressure becoming more dominant over Scandinavia. This low pressure in the Atlantic is stalling, and the wind is doing something a bit like that. So we are pushing up some warm air advection actually towards Greenland, which is helping this ridge over Scandinavia to inflate. Excuse me. And then we get through to the second half of next week, and we start to bat the winds into the east then. So the high pressure over Scandinavia is now taking over the pattern. Notice the southerly wind here is going up towards Greenland with these low pressures stalled in the Atlantic. So we are taking warm air advection into Greenland, and also some of it is actually going up into the Arctic, which is allowing this ridge on the eastern side of the warm air advection to intensify over Scandinavia. So the winds are going into the east through the second half of next week. By Friday, 10th of February, 10 days away, but we are pulling in this bitterly cold easterly wind. A really cold wind is coming in from the east then on the latest run of the GFS, but we know it isn't all that well supported by the GFS ensembles. This is how we go up to Saturday, 11th of February. Again, in those easterly winds, they are bitterly cold winds. They probably would be dragging in snow to the southern and eastern part of the country. These are the upper air temperatures. So the start of next week looks fairly chilly on Monday, milder but with rain on Tuesday, and then we begin to pull in colder air both from the north and from the east on Wednesday. So by the time we go through to Thursday next week, the -10 isotherm is starting to move onto the east coast with those easterly winds, and got quite a deep cold pool sitting over the North Sea, Denmark and Germany. So it's a direct hit then as you get through to Friday of bitterly cold air with the -10 isotherm across the whole of the country, and running over the North Sea. That will be picking up moisture and instability and creating snow showers down the eastern coast. So a bitterly cold easterly wind with risk of snow into the second half of next week, and then that's how we go out to day 10. Still looking bitterly cold with those easterly winds. But as I say, we know that this is not very well supported by the GFS ensembles. ECMWF looks like this. For Sunday, low pressures coming in off the Atlantic into Monday, still unsettled, and on Tuesday as well. Again, notice the low pressure is in the Atlantic. It's stalling, allowing warm air advection to push up in towards Greenland, which causes this ridge that's already there across Scandinavia to inflate and intensify. And as we go through into the middle and latter stages of next week, then we start to pull the air in from the east. It's not a strong easterly though on the ECMWF, so the risk of snow is probably a little bit reduced, but it's the same sort of idea. You will get chopping and changing in terms of detail, but same sort of idea, which is to turn things bitterly cold from the east through the second half of next week. And that's how we finish up on day 10 with a ridge through the country, an extension essentially of the main high pressure that's blocking over Scandinavia and western parts of Russia. This is a proper Scandinavian high. It's not something that's built up from the Azores and sort of found its way to Scandinavia. This is an actual extension, if you like, of the Siberian and Arctic high pressure. So it's a proper high there that's over Scandinavia. If we do get these easterly winds late next week, I think we'll probably know about it. These are the ECMWF ensembles. Now we do see a cooling trend. This is for De Beeld in Holland. Do see a cooling trend. This is where we're starting off, fairly mild at the moment. It is downwards through into next week, quite obviously. But you see that this red line just here is what we're just looking at, the ECMWF operational run, and it is a bit of a cold outlier. So again, not all that well supported, these EC winds by the ECM ensemble. So before we start getting too excited about the potential for some very cold and wintry weather next week, and there is potential there, but before we get too excited about it, I think we need to see both the GFS and the ECM ensembles beginning to firm up and move in that direction. Could just be that the operationals are going off on a little bit of a tangent. Finally, I just want to leave you with the CFS V2 for the next month. I wanted to look at these yesterday but didn't have time, so just quickly run through. These are 500 millibar heights broken down into week periods. The first week period takes from the 1st through the 7th of February. Got the ridge in over Scandinavia. Low pressure is in the Atlantic, so for the coming week, still more or less Atlantic driven, but we know this ridge over Scandinavia is intensifying. The CFS then has the high pressure becoming the driving factor into week 2, which is the 8th through to the 14th of February. The low pressure in the Atlantic is going on a more southerly track, going down something like that. So this would allow colder air to start to move in around this big ridge from the east. So the CFS is seeing the high pressure over Scandinavia winning the battle, if you like, and turning winds into the east. Week 3, which is the 15th through 21st, still looks cold. High pressure is centred over Scandinavia. The flow would still be coming in from the east as well. So could be a fairly prolonged cold spell actually through week 2 and week 3 of the month. And then week 4 still keeps it quite cold. 22nd, 28th of February. The heights are lowering across Scandinavia, but they're still more or less there. Still probably bringing in the air from the east. A deep trough through the Mediterranean as well, so that could be stealing a lot of the cold air, but nevertheless it still looks a pretty cold signal there going through to the end of February. So I think the CFS is starting to run away with the idea that we could be in for quite a cold month. Let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. Although the CFS is doing that, we see no real support for these easy winds from either the GFS or the ECMWF ensembles till they start coming on board. I think because of what's happened so far this winter with the failed easterly attempts, I think we have to have a little bit of caution about the chance of bitterly cold easterly winds next week. But one thing we do have in our favour compared to what's happened through the winter so far with the failed easterlies is the stratospheric warming, which in theory, if theory is right, it should reduce the zonal westerlies. Even if it doesn't reverse them, it should reduce them, and it should weaken the polar vortex as well, which might allow us to get that high pressure in position over Scandinavia. Once it gets in position, these ridges across Scandinavia can be very stubborn, as we see from the CFS V2. Once you actually get into the pattern, locked into it, it can take a long time to get out of it. But the problem, as we've seen so often this winter, is actually getting the ridge over Scandinavia in the first place. So we're going to wait and see where it's going. I've got the February month-ahead broadcast coming up tomorrow, and be very interested to see what that has to say. During the February month-ahead broadcast later on, our friend Terry Skoll is going to be releasing his February forecast, so come back for that tonight. But that's all for now, and thanks for watching.